Hi, welcome to the Talk Spot. This is Marcus, and today I'm joined by Bob Mankoff. Bob, thank you so much for coming on.
It's a pleasure. I'm here with my two cats who may or may not be involved in this interview, depending on how intrusive they are.
All right. Well, definitely. Well, that sounds good. So, if you wouldn't mind, can you tell us a little bit about your career and how you got started and everything?
Sure. Well, a long way. Let's see, I'm 76 now, so my human career started in 1944. I don't think I'm responsible for anything that happened in World War II. Grew up in Queens, New York, Jewish background, and so I had a lot of humor was part of my life in people I knew and kids I knew and wisecracking and being sort of fast on your feet. I went to the High School of Music and Art in New York City, and that's what it was called then, and I guess there's been a number of iterations of the movie Fame, which was sort of based on that school, and there were a number of specialized schools in New York City that you had to get into by passing an exam, and music and art was one of them. It was up in what was called, I guess there still is called, Spanish Harlem in New York, and I took a portfolio of drawings there and some drawing on the spot, and I got into that school. So I was interested in drawing from the very beginning. Also growing up in my neighborhood and where I used to go to hotels in what was called the Borscht, I would hear comedians, Jackie Mason and Rodney Dangerfield and Hetty Youngman, all of these comedians who were Jewish comedians, and sort of I got it in my idea that either I might be a comedian or I might do something in humor. Well, after graduating from the High School of Music and Art, I went to Syracuse University. It was the 60s, and I remember when I graduated, I went to New York City to show cartoons I had done while I was in college, and no one seemed to recognize at that time I was a genius, so I stopped, went to graduate school, almost got my PhD in psychology, but was on the cusp of my PhD, which was the world's longest cusp, and I quit. And at 30, I decided, well, now I'm going to be a cartoonist. And long story, not that short, took me about 4 years to finally get into the New Yorker, and published many cartoons in the New Yorker from 1977 to 1997 when I became cartoon editor. And then I was cartoon editor there for 20 years. Then I left. I was cartoon editor for Esquire for a while. Now I'm cartoon editor for Grady Carter's Airmail. I also run Cartoon Stock and Cartoon Collections, which are cartoon licensing companies. So that's a very short bio.
So what makes a good cartoonist when it comes to print?
Well, when it comes to anything, I would say that you need, I used to say it's not the ink, it's the think. You have to come up with ideas, lots of ideas. So when I was cartoon editor at the New Yorker, and new cartoonists would come to me and they would say, well, how many cartoons should I do every week? And I'd say, well, do 10. And they'd say, why 10? I said, well, because 9 out of 10 things in life don't work out. So I think one of the things that makes anybody good at anything is doing a lot of bad stuff from which you call the good stuff.
I like that rule. 9 out of 10 things in life aren't going to work out.
Well, you know that from whatever you've been in, and that the difference between an amateur and a professional is that an amateur really likes what they've done, and a professional is usually dissatisfied. So often when I would get ideas from the outside, people would send me one cartoon that they were convinced were the world's best cartoon. And I would say, well, that's actually the sign of an amateur, that you're so convinced that it's interesting. Jerry Seinfeld has a book out which is sort of a compilation of all his routines. He just has it out. And the title of the book is a little oblique, but it's called Is This Anything? Which is what comedians ask each other about a gag or a routine. They're never convinced. Mm-hmm. Even when I was doing cartoons, I was never really convinced that this is a great cartoon or this is something good. You'd always have to wait. So you really never know what's going to be a hit with an audience. And that's why you need feedback, and that's why I guess there are even such strange things as cartoon editors.
So what is the creative process like in the sense of what gets published and what doesn't? I mean, does it come from the newspaper side, for example? I mean, do they say, or let's say, for example, the New Yorker, do they say, we need a cartoon, let's say about, I don't know, let's say, okay, yeah, exactly. Do they say...
let's say about Trump.
Okay.
Nobody needs another cartoon about Trump, incidentally.
So, I mean, is that...
I don't think anybody needs another joke about Trump. But the New Yorker, when I was there, was never like that, or maybe rarely like that. So the cartoonists, I would see about 1,000 cartoons a week, and the idea or the conceit or whatever you want to call it, certainly when I came up, was that the cartoons weren't necessarily going to be what everybody was thinking about. It was going to be what was inspired the cartoonist. So I used to say, and I think it's changed somewhat because everything is so driven by topicality now and by partisanship. And by money. So that certainly when I came up and then when I was a cartoon, it was frankly a little bit like an ivory tower. I would say to the cartoonist, you know what? Once I had found cartoonists that I liked and that other people liked there, the other editors liked there, and they thought they had a spark, something original to say. I said, here's the deal. You do what you like. Just do whatever you like, and then we'll see what we like of what you do, and then we hope that the people we show it to like it. So it's probably very different than this whole focus group idea of it, of find out first what your audience likes or what your management likes, and then sort of, do these bespoke cartoons to that end. So no, it wasn't. And I've gone there since 2017. So I think it has changed, especially with daily cartoons and topical cartoons, in that it's still the cartoonist generating it. It's not like, I think that's the way you get the best work.
You mentioned the topicality, and you mentioned the idea of really being, I'm trying to think of how to say this in the correct way. Obviously, everyone that has worked in print, everyone's obviously a professional, but I think kind of what you were alluding to was almost the idea of like consultants or analytic people saying you need to talk about this or that. And if I'm totally mistaken, you can.
Yeah, I definitely think that. I know that, for example, when I was at Esquire for a year, it started to become what was going to be online was very digitally driven. So it was what got the most clicks. And what gets the most clicks is not, I didn't find that pleasing because often what gets the most clicks is a kind of okay mediocrity. Most people, I did an experiment because my background was in psychology. People often think they want novelty in humor. They don't really want novelty, not most people. I do, but most people don't. They actually like things, it's like everything in popular culture. Pretty much what everybody wants is what's already popular with a twist. So that's why you see all the sequels to movies. And that's true of, I think, humor also. But when you're sort of involved in it a lot, my feeling was I wanted to sort of lead the audience a little bit rather than to follow the audience. And I think analytics has definitely changed that because you're following the money now in ways that you never could before.
Would you say
and that becomes a very, very powerful incentive.
Would you say that that kind of changed? Did that happen? Would you say that like over the last 10 years, or was that something even back in the 90s or 2000s they started to behave
No,
differently?
no, I don't think so. I think it's in the last, it's probably in the last 10 years. And also there are other drivers now. One of the drivers is for diversity, and which is an admirable goal, but if you often sacrifice something if you want diversity, which is that the people, let's say if you want diversity in male and female in the number of cartoonists, traditionally there's been more men in humor than women. It's not because men are funnier, or I don't think necessarily, although I do tend to think men's and women's humor, although there's a huge amount of overlap, tends to be different. The culture treats people differently. That wouldn't be a surprise. If you want to say, well, the number of cartoonists in the New Yorker are going to be equally men and women, and men have tended to be more, now you have to go look for women cartoonists who won't necessarily have the same experience or be as published as much. Well, I think that sometimes, well, then there's a training factor involved, and you don't get as high quality cartoons, at least originally.
Would you?
It'd be like saying, oh, we don't have enough black cartoonists, which, to my knowledge, I don't think there's many African American or black cartoonists in the New Yorker. Well, there aren't that many black cartoonists doing New Yorker kinds of cartoons, so it becomes difficult to have that kind of representation.
Well, if you had to compare, let's say, well, I guess maybe this might be more direct. In the time that you've been in the publication realm in general, when would you say was towards the peak of the best material being put out in terms of articles and just everything in general? And when would you say is closer to the lower point from what you said?
Well, I think it's gone through different periods. I mean, there are periods in the New Yorker cartoons in the 60s and 70s where it's very much of an in-joke. It's very much upper-class people talking to themselves in slight nuances in humor, but not jokes that I think a lot of people would necessarily think are funny, although there are plenty of good cartoons there as well. I think you see different kinds of peaks in, the New Yorker sort of doesn't invent a single-panel cartoon, but by the 1930s, they're doing classic jokes, and they're becoming very, very popular. Will a lot of these jokes work for people now? I don't know. But I think it's like every era sort of has to be evaluated by the audience of its era. Mark Twain is a great humorist. Are millennials going to love Mark Twain's stories? I don't know. Or monologues? I don't know. That doesn't mean he wasn't a great humorist. It has to be looked upon, in its own time. I say there were certainly peaks in the New Yorker in the 30s and probably in the 50s. I think that, frankly, there was a generation that came in, my generation in the late 70s of Roz Chast, Jack Ziegler, lots of other cartoonists, and I think we did really good work, I think, through the 90s. I think I brought in a lot of great cartoonists during, my era. And, we're going to have to see. The new cartoon editor starting 2017 is Emma Allen. I think she's feeling her way. I think eventually there'll be really good cartoons there also, although I do feel there was initially a dip, and I probably have a bias.
So let's say for companies like Esquire and the New Yorker, I mean, do they even have, I'm trying to think of how to say it properly, is 99% of their focus on online and just 1% is the print, or is it a little bit more equal in that sense where they look at both?
Well, I think the New Yorker, I think more and more it's online, because that is where, although the New Yorker, I think, is different because they, I think, solved the problem in print by, they had such a loyal audience that they could raise the, originally 70 or 80% of the revenue in a magazine like New Yorker was was being generated by print advertising. And that wasn't sustainable once Google and Facebook and everyone else sort of sucked up the rest of the advertising. So what the New Yorker did, and I think they solved the problem, was by charging a high subscription rate and having a high loyalty to the magazine. So I don't know what the split is. Certainly the New Yorker online is doing well. And the New Yorker in general is doing well. I don't think Hearst and Esquire did solve that problem. So I think the New Yorker does, it's certainly shifted. I would say it's 50-50 now between print and digital, where it was overwhelmingly print at one time.
And would you say the same thing is true for Esquire, or are they more digital?
I think digital is what's driving everything there. You can't make money in the magazine. So and that's why I think in general a lot of magazines are just having an enormous amount of difficulty. But why a lot of print, classic print magazines like Time, Sports Illustrated, Newsweek have just disappeared.
Yeah.
All of that. Yeah. So I don't think this is necessarily, it's not a tragedy. You know what I mean? It's just what technology is evolved in now, overall, I'm an optimist. I feel that I'm an optimist in this way. I started these companies, cartooncollections.com and cartoonstock.com, so people, I'm plugging them here, so people could access, and license cartoons for all sorts of media, especially online media.
Do you feel like when it comes to print publications, do you feel like what's happening right now is this is like the car replacing the horse-drawn carriage, where eventually the carriage is going to be, basically obsolete or just a novelty thing that you see, around certain cities just for sightseeing.
You mean like it's what's going to happen to vinyl?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, do you think print will become that, or
I mean, it's interesting because where I'm actually cartoon editor now is Graydon Carter went from Vanity Fair, and now it's an online publication called Airmail, which is very much like a magazine. I mean, it sort of looks like a magazine. You don't turn pages. It's got cartoons in it. It's got high quality articles, that kind of thing. And because I'm of my generation, it's interesting. Something has happened to me personally. I was a very early adopter of things. I bought a personal computer back in 1979. I bought the first Mac that came out, you know what I mean? Not the Apple II, but the first Macintosh in '84. So I was always sort of in my own life and in my own mind on the forefront of all of this. I mean, in 1984, I did a cartoon for the New Yorker where there's a guy at an electronics store saying, all my gadgets are old, I'd like some new gadgets. And that was like my life. I loved gadgets. I loved electronics. I loved the future, right? And I created a cartoon bank before the New Yorker. I created a cartoon bank where you could license cartoons in the early 90s. And then I had it online in the mid-90s, and the New Yorker bought that for me. So I was very much into all of this change. And, loved reading Wired when it was like, I don't know, it's almost like technology porn, right?
Yeah, that's one way of describing it. It's going to be so great. Everything's going to be great. We'll have neural links to our brains. Everything's going to be wonderful. And I sort of burned out on that. And now I have every version of the Kindle that ever existed. And now I find myself, I'm reading, when I buy stuff from Amazon Books, I buy a book. It just like got too much, where I just wanted to sit down in my easy chair, put the light on, and read a book. And so that's my particular, so maybe that will just be my generation, or maybe it'll be, as you suggest, a sort of multifaceted environment.
in which, well, for one thing, I do think that in terms of print books, it sort of evened out. There was this thought that books were going to completely disappear, right? And
Yeah, I remember
yet there
that.
is a hunger, I think, for physical objects. So I think ebooks sort of plateaued. So I do buy both now, but I find that I don't know about you, but there's something about having a book which forces you to actually focus on that material. And any other thing, any other tablet, of course, I've got the iPad, of course, I've got my iPhone, I've got the Kindle. So sometimes I spend most of my day just charging things.
Yeah, I'm literally charging my phone right now during this interview.
Most of the day I'm just I'm charging things. Well, okay, I've got my watch, I've got my iPhone. For some reason, I think I have to charge all the versions of my Kindle. Where I feel like bad for the Kindle that's showing its, bad screen, that it needs to be charged. And somehow I've abandoned that. So I don't know. I mean, logically, you would think that eventually it will all be electronic, right? But my other thing I know is I don't know what's going to happen. And that when I'm being interviewed, I have to pretend like I do.
Well, it's interesting. So for this podcast network that we're doing this interview on right now, we actually we have a physical print newspaper. So I started a physical print paper, and I mean, even in this climate, it's actually been quite a bit easier to actually sell advertisements for that paper than actually this digital podcast, which reaches way more people than the paper. Yeah, but it's so.
What is the paper? What is the paper?
So it's called UCast News. I can send you a link to it and everything like that after
send me
after
a
the
link.
interview.
Why don't we provide some cartoons for it? We could do some sort of barter deal.
Yeah, I would totally be open to that.
No, because I'm saying I run these companies which we license cartoons. We get new cartoons every day. We get editorial cartoons, all of that. And, it's interesting, though, because you're making me think of something that happened yesterday with my freezer, okay? So the guy comes up, it's something that's not making, it's first world problems, right? It's not making, the Sub-Zero is not making ice correctly. I'm 911 emergency. I don't think you call for that. Sub-Zero is not making ice. Okay, the guy comes over and he looks at that. Oh well, your ice thing's broken. I got to replace it. Oops, what happened? One of my technology now. One of my AirPods popped out of my ear, and I guess I'm going. Let me just.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, I'm putting it back in my ear. So the guy comes by, and then he makes out the bill for me, and he's using carbon paper for the dupe. And I said, really? You're still using? And then he explained to me, he said, I got a million different things. I can't get the right app. You know what I mean? I can't. We carry all different things. Some of the invoices are weird. And I sort of understood why he just wanted to keep doing it with carbon paper. Because he did point out, it's a cliche, he says, the carbon paper never crashes. Yeah. I go to places where there isn't Wi-Fi, the whole situation. I think all of us, especially now when we've been in the pandemic, we have the Zoom fatigue, the Zoom malaise, right? Just all of it that's happening. There's a hunger for some kind of reality. I mean, I had to go into New York where our offices are, and I emailed someone and said, well, I'm going to New York. I just want to make sure it's still there. Because I sort of feel like everything that has become this kind of sort of, I think some of my dreams are Zoom dreams, which all the characters are appearing in little squares.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think, I mean, in my own in personal opinion, I feel like, I don't know if print will go anywhere anytime soon because I feel like one advantage that print has over digital is that when it comes to digital, so much of it is based on, your past behavior. What have you looked at? So have you gone to this website? And then based on that, ads for that
Yeah,
specific product, they appear on Google and Facebook and all those places. But for print, in my opinion, at least as of now, it seems like, you're walking in a grocery store, then the magazine catches you or the newspaper catches you if you're somewhere, if it's just
yeah,
literally right on in your driveway, you just, oh, okay, well, 9 out of 10 times like you're saying, I mean, you might look at it and say, oh, that looks just like crap. I don't want to read about local stuff. But then one time, the image or whatever the article title looks interesting and you pick it
yeah.
up. And I feel like, I don't know. In my opinion, I could definitely see there being something of like
Well,
both existing in the future.
yeah, I think they will. I mean, honestly, just that it has leveled out, and that I find myself the. And I think there is some research. I find that when you're reading a physical object, I think it's this sort of idea of embodied thought. You feel something. You know what I mean? And it's it's different. And it's different in a lot of ways also. I mean, I'm interested in the Civil War, interested in Abraham Lincoln, and, I get a book like called The Face of Lincoln, which has a life size, all the pictures ever taken of them. There's something different about holding that. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely.
Than looking at it online. There's a feeling also of permanence. I mean, it's interesting. I've got flat files of my cartoons that I did on essentially nice typing paper back in the 70s. And it may be a pencil mark, but it's still there. And I mean, I know actually about my work because some people value it. These original cartoons that appeared. See, the original cartoons that appeared in the New Yorker in the 70s were done before digital. So they're really cool. They have all markings on them on the back about how they're going to be shown or cropped. They have a little piece of sort of brown paper over them with the New Yorker stamp. And I've said to my daughter, who's 29 now, I said, hold on to these. I think they'll be valuable. Because now, in terms of digital stuff, often it's not drawn at all, on a piece of paper, so it's completely digital. There is no original. There is no original object. And I do know that this work that I've done and in my drawers and in some cases have been collected, that, I mean, it's weird. I know 100 years from now, someone will be looking at it somewhere. And that's interesting to me.
Well, I mean,
They'll be holding a physical object that I created, that I put ink on paper, that a human being created. And I think that's different than what's happening digitally, where everything is archived, but it's almost like all the PH videos that people took, right? It's somewhere, but is anyone ever going to look at that?
well, I also wonder about when it comes to everything only existing on digital that, I don't know, I mean, one day, I mean, God forbid things get, really crazy in the world in America, but I mean,
Yeah.
what if one day, their virus gets created and deletes everything
Deletes it
digital?
all.
Yeah, or what if something happens where people's opinions about things totally change to a point where, all they have to do is say, okay, we push a button and then all of a sudden things of the past are gone. And I definitely agree with you.
That is the difficulty with, to get wonky with digital media, right? You still have to need the devices to access it and play it, right?
Yeah.
So this is actually sort of the ridiculous thing that even happens in the United States, I believe, Defense Department, where they're still using floppy disks.
Really, I didn't know that.
And yeah, that's true. Some of these legacy software programs that people use still have, maybe floppy disks, and that's even the case now, to some extent, where you see that because, for some reason, I started buying the Mac, so I've got in their ecosystem. Now they've decided, something like, okay, at a certain point, no more DVD drives, right? And so now you've got DVDs, and you're looking for how to play them, or they become obsolete. So I think you're right that this idea that everything is digital and has. No, I actually think that there are people who are concerned about the problems and they're looking at the redundancy, but I guess it certainly makes a good scenario, a script for yet another apocalyptic novel, right?
Yeah.
where a kind of Westworld thing where everything is either deleted or eliminated or transformed, right, in some way to change it from what was actually written. So a kind of disinformation that would actually go through, it's like an Elon Musk paranoia, right? So the AI goes in and changes the actual documents to create a view opposite from what they said or alter them in some way.
Yeah. No, I mean,
to some extent, this happened with the New York Times, a slight scandal with the 619 Project, where they went in and they changed the introduction, which was pretty strong originally, saying that the real founding of our country was 619. When slaves came over, rather than 1776, they got a lot of pushback on that, and then they went in and changed what the original article was. And so you can do a lot. You can change what you put up digitally. Where let's put it this way: if the Times newspaper that came out in 1976 can't be changed.
Yeah. No, I mean,
now, or anybody's publication couldn't be changed. It was a real publication that you could see, and now if everything is digital, then it becomes easy to I made up a verb here. I guess it already exists, to disinform it.
Yeah.
I guess I'm using from disinformation. I don't know if anybody else has used that yet, but I like it.
I like it a lot too.
It. Yeah.
And I mean, right now, I mean, we see. I mean, I think of. It's a very small and minuscule example, but with George Lucas and Star Wars. I mean, I'm not sure if you heard about this debate where, in Star Wars Episode 4, there's a debate between in the original version of the film, Han Solo shoots his character first, right? And I mean, for an example like that, all numerous newer editions that have come out, they've redone that scene. So the bad guy shoots first at Han Solo, whatever, dodges it and shoots him back.
Oh, is this the one where there's like a big fearsome guy and he just, I guess he just shoots him, but yeah, it's sort of a joke, right?
Well, now what's kind of happened is, I mean, I think in the original version that George Lucas made, I mean, I think the idea was, Han Solo shoots this guy first, but even though he's a good guy, it kind of doesn't look like a good guy type of a move. And then since then, they want to try to, I guess soften the edges. Exactly.
Yeah, well, that's happening with a lot of episodes that have been scrubbed or taken off either syndicated TV shows because, look, the term is political correctness, and it's a kind of a group think about what is correct and what was correct in the past, and we don't want to be socially shamed now for some sort of past episode. So that's happening to a lot of TV shows where they're removing some shows that previously might have had something in them that people now think is objectionable, either sexist or racist or whatever. And, I think that's just an enormous mistake.
Well, in your career too, I mean, did you kind of see the rise of that somewhat, where it became, this group thing type of mentality, or just things where?
Yeah, definitely. I think there are cartoons that would have that appeared in the New Yorker in the '90s under present editorship, which definitely would not appear now, and that I don't think in any way. I mean, Trump has polarized everything, so I don't think the left side of the political equation can be made fun of. In other words, I don't think there could be a negative joke in the New Yorker about Joe Biden's mental acuity, right? Could not be anymore. And at one point, you can make fun of Trump, but you can't make fun of Joe Biden. You couldn't make fun of Hillary Clinton. So I think that was already there in the idea that it's too important that you basically, even by your humor, you have to show by what side you're on. And I always felt that as a humorist, I wanted to be, for the most part, on the sidelines. I personally like making fun of people who are closer to my political positions than people who are against them. I just think it's more interesting to make fun of your own. It's really what it means to have a sense of humor. For instance, Donald Trump doesn't have a sense of humor. That doesn't mean he's not funny. Donald Trump absolutely can be funny. Of course, ridicule is a kind of humor. Look, it's subjective. He's funny because the people in his audience laugh. Now, the fact that you don't laugh, that doesn't mean anything. That means that in some way he's funny. But because that's the nature of thing, when our friends make fun of our enemies, we always think it's funnier than the other way around. But having a sense of humor is to be able to make fun of yourself. You know what I mean? Or have some perspective, or to see your own class as ridiculous. And that is, to me, the deepest kind of humor, that you don't project outward. And, it's not whether it's punching down, it's more elbowing to the side for your own, because it's your own, it's people like you who you know best and who you can see the foibles and failures in. And especially just when you have a sense of humor that gives you a perspective on your own life. So, that's my personal feeling about it.
No, I mean, I can totally agree with that. And I mean, I feel like a large part of the media is supposed to be, speaking truth to power, whatever side they may be, whatever politician that might be. And I mean, I don't know. I look at that and I say to myself.
But it doesn't always have to speak truth to power. It can just speak truth in general.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I don't think this thing of power up or punching down or elbowing to the side, it's too complicated for that. Yeah. The idea that we can't, that there's this strict hierarchy of who can make fun of who, I think that's just limiting. And then it can be criticized. It can be, you can criticize somebody making a joke, but I don't subscribe to that therefore you can only make a joke about people who are somehow above your position, as though you have some sort of Excel document to say where everybody is in society.
You make a power ranking.
Right, that I have an organization chart, right? That's just too stifling. I mean, I think freedom of speech is really freedom of speech, and humor is part of that. Yeah. And we become so, well, partly because of the power of social media to what's called cancel culture. So you can really have your life very much disturbed because a number of people don't like a joke you made, and actually that's very chilling, because we all have lives that we don't want disturbed.
Yeah, I mean, we even saw some of that. Do you remember? It was such a one that I thought was, even though it was probably 4 years ago now, I want to say, it was such a little play on words that I was surprised that like people got really in a tizzy about it. But it was the Jerry Seinfeld thing, and he tweeted I think he was gonna have oh my gosh, I can't remember his first name. I know his last name is Lewis Black. He was gonna have Lewis Black on his show, and he tweeted out. I think it was a preview of that episode, and the tweet was, "Black's life matters."
Is this the comedians in cars having coffee?
Yeah,
show?
exactly. Yeah, it was that show, and he tweeted, yeah, the Blacks, like, Lewis Black's life matters, kind of. And
Oh, right.
yeah, some people were like, "Oh my gosh!" I can't. And this was probably, I want to say, like 3 or 4 years ago. It for sure wasn't this year.
Right, because for this year it would have been, it's like, right. So this is something in which people cannot have any rational discussion about anymore. In other words, you can't have any rational discussion about it because you're afraid, and so here's where I'll put it: there's public humor, there's private humor, and there's secret humor, and we can all see what's happening in the New York Times and stuff. So you can't. Here's my feeling is, I don't think slogans are arguments. That's all I can say. Make America Great isn't an argument. Black Lives Matter. It's not. You can't say, well, Black lives don't matter. So you can't have it. I'm not for the compression of thought into a slogan that I'm either for or against. Doesn't make any sense to me. You can't argue against Make America Great. What do you mean? You don't want to make America great? Black Lives Matter. What, you don't think Black Lives Matter? That's not where I think a discussion can start.
So you just said a term I've never heard before, secret humor. What do you mean by that?
What's in your own head?
Oh, okay.
I make jokes that I won't tell anybody because everybody has the right to be bad in their own head. Everybody has the right to have bad thoughts in their own head. You know what I mean? If you've ever been in a real relationship and you haven't had a really bad thought, you haven't been in a really real relationship.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it doesn't mean that you would express it, right? But we're human beings. We have it. So we have bad thoughts, we have sexual thoughts, we have all sorts of thoughts, and we have jokes in my mind that I will say or think that will amuse me, and I need to be able to do that. I can't have my mind completely controlled. That is just too stifling. And so that's what I mean. The public humor has become something in which you have to be very, very careful simply for practical reasons. I mean, the most extreme example wouldn't be cancel culture; it would be kill culture, like when Charlie Hebdo, when the cartoonists were assassinated, right? At the assassin's veto. And that's the truth about the original Muhammad cartoons also. It was really what's called the assassin's veto. People didn't, those cartoons, which were very, very mild, the ones that appeared originally in the Danish magazine, they were very mild. The reason, New York Times said, well, we didn't publish them because we didn't think they were funny. Well, that would be ridiculous. They were certainly news, or they could be easily described. They didn't publish them because they were afraid there would be bomb threats. They were afraid someone might be killed. So now, it's certainly not that severe now, but in terms of the kind of culture on the extreme left, which doesn't permit people to speak at universities, because actually a mob will shout them down or maybe actually even injure them, which happened in the case of Charles Murray. Whatever you think about his opinions, the idea that a guy who's written books on it, and you disagree with his books, you completely disagree with the bell curve, but that he certainly has the right to speak in the way that, it's what Noam Chomsky, who has been completely on the opposite side of any argument from Charles Murray, would say, but the idea that they can't speak at a university and the way that you deal with their views is to present opposing views. So
Yeah.
I think we're in a real problem in the culture because of this.
I think you're 100% right. And I mean, I'm fearful of how far this will go and how long it'll last. But I do hope one day the pendulum just swings. And I mean, honestly, it's.
Well, I think the pendulum is starting to swing with the Harper's letter and with this, is that we can't be afraid of ideas. We can't, because it's not just fear of an idea, but it's the belief that only your idea is right. And that's the most dangerous thing of all. I mean, everyone needs to believe that their ideas may well be wrong and completely wrong, and you need some sort of evidence to back up whatever you're saying. You can't just be that I am virtuous and you are not, which is I think where we are now. We're pretty much in a political discussion where you couldn't possibly believe that anything that Trump would do is good. And I believe Trump is the worst president I can imagine that I've ever experienced. But that wouldn't mean that I would categorically deny that anything he would do would be that I would be for. And I think that's where we are pretty much in the culture now. You have to sort of pledge allegiance completely to your side. And that's something I can't do both as a citizen and certainly as someone who thinks humor is important.
Yeah. No, I mean, I 100% agree with you because, ultimately there's things on both sides where, you might have someone that's, a fairly conservative Republican person, but that doesn't mean that 100% of everything Bernie Sanders says they might disagree with. And I mean, obviously,
or I could disagree. I mean, Mel Brooks had some sort of joke where he said, Hitler was a good dancer. Okay. So, yeah, you know what? If he was a good dancer, he was a good dancer. Well, it's the same thing, I guess, in a much milder way. It's like, you know what? I think Louis C.K. is a great comedian. I know what he did. Absolutely. Doesn't change the jokes.
Yeah.
Doesn't change it. I think that Bill Cosby's early comic routines are great. They are. Okay. The routine is the routine. I mean, it's like, or the work of art. I mean, if we went back, Plato is definitely racist. There's no question about it. Aristotle too, and they're big proponents of slavery.
Yeah.
Are we going to stop? Does that mean that we stop reading Plato and Aristotle and these philosophers for what they had to contribute? Because somehow their ideas don't comport with what the 21st century was from, 5,000 years ago. I mean, that's where we sort of are now, I think.
Well, I think there's certain people that is what they want. I think there's certain people that I remember, even for the New York Times, there was something that came up. Oh my gosh, I can't remember. I feel like it was within the last 6 months where, and you can totally correct me if I'm wrong here, but there was something where I don't know if it was one of the founders, but there was someone involved at the New York Times, I feel like, in its early infancy.
John Bennett had to resign as the op-ed editor because he printed an op-ed column by Tom Cotton saying that you could call out the troops to quell violence in the streets. So he had to resign because an op-ed column by a senator was printed. So, I mean, that was one thing, which is, why wouldn't there be an op-ed column by a senator, even if you completely disagreed with it? This is someone of significance in the Senate that you're going to have to deal with. So I think we're in, this situation where if Biden gets elected, which I certainly hope he does, well, here's my joke sort of about using Trump. Like if all of a sudden Trump invented a cure for cancer, the left would say, yeah, but it's not a really important cancer. And most of the work was done by Obama anyway. So.
Well, I mean, you see that with the vaccine. Some people say, I won't take the vaccine if he created it. Well, I have thought it's Donald Trump's not putting on a white doctor's coat and he's in the lab with mixing chemicals. Right?
Yeah, I think that's true. You'll be surprised how much people on the left side will be for a vaccine if Biden is elected.
Yeah, exactly.
How quickly they'll be taking it. And so we're in a situation where Trump wants to make the pandemic seem much less worse than it is, and the left wants to make it seem much worse than it is. And it is bad, okay? But that's driving both sides of it, right? I mean, that's obvious. Or even in terms of the confirmation of Barrett. Coney Barrett. We both know that if the situation was reversed, Democrats would do exactly the same thing, wouldn't they? No one doubts that.
Yeah. No, I mean you're totally right.
I mean, no one doubts that if these are judged, and I think that's one of the ways in which you judge these arguments, right? What would the other side do if they were in this situation? If the other side would do exactly what the side you don't like in this situation, then you don't really have moral high ground here. Speaking of moral high ground, I don't know. I gotta write. I can't write. Steve Jobs is dead, but I'm going to write to Tim Scott about these AirPods falling out of my ear, and say, I spent good money for these AirPods Pro, and you knowingly have made these, that people like me, they won't stay in my ears. So, and I just want to say to everyone listening, my heart goes out to everyone who's having trouble with their AirPods.
Thank you.
I just know how horrible that can be. So anything else you want to ask me?
No, I was just about to say, I want to thank you for coming on. And how can are you producing new cartoons to this day?
Yeah, we get new cartoons through my company all the time, cartooncollections.com and Cartoon Stock. And so you've got my the best email. Should I communicate with Antara to get to you, or vice versa, or how should we do this?
I'll get your email from her, and then I can reach out to you. And I wanted to ask you. Okay.
Sure.
I was going to also
reach out to me.
Okay,
Sure.
And then is there things for the public? I mean, I guess are there things that we can kind of keep up with your work? Are you active on Twitter or anything like that? Where I
am active is on my sites that I write a blog usually on Mondays for cartooncollections.com and cartoonstock.com, and if they go and sign up for cartoonstock.com or cartooncollections.com, they don't have to buy anything. If they sign up, they'll get my newsletter that I sort of funny and interesting. It has cartoons. I really don't do Twitter too much. You know what I mean? I did it for a while, and then I said it became it's a full-time job to do Twitter.
Yeah, some people. Some people tweet so much it is a full-time job. Yeah.
No, I felt like, especially when I was after New York, you got to start tweeting. Of course, I have a Twitter account and everything, but then also it just seemed. I have these other platforms, I guess, and I do write this newsletter and stuff. And also, if people want to buy my memoir, How About Never Is Never Good For You, My Life in Cartoons, that's the bestseller. You can go to Amazon and get that. But go to either cartoonstock.com or cartoonselections.com and sign up to get my newsletter. And I think you'll be mildly entertained, which is all I can promise.
All right, Bob. Well, definitely. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it, and I will talk to you later.
Yeah, great. Good talking to you. Thanks for a really good interview. Thanks for those interesting questions.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that. Take care.